2, 1, and welcome. We are live, made in the 80s, episode 15. I'm your host, J-Boy, the graded 80s kid, here with my main man, Seal VHS, Thomas Nardini. We welcome you to the show. A lot of exciting news to share with you today. A lot of new developments, a lot of new things for us coming up that you won't want to miss. I got I'm picking a nose hair, a lot of stuff that you won't want to miss announcement-wise, and a lot of good unboxing stuff at the end. So if you're tuning in and you want to see some cool unboxing stuff at the end, we're probably only going to limit the first half of this to a half hour or so, and then we'll dedicate the last half hour to Instagram Live and some unboxing and some other stuff. So thanks for joining us. Lots to talk about since the last episode a couple weeks ago. A lot of new stuff in the mail, a lot of happenings.
A lot of ins, a lot of
outs. A lot of what have yous. First off, I would say, big news, collectibles-wise. Certainly this isn't from the 80s, but it certainly seems like it's going to be a big collectible piece going forward. Last night's LCG auction, our good buddy over there in New Orleans, set a few records with collectibles, including the Apple iPhone original release, sealed. Looked like it was a very, very mint copy, sealed, of the original iPhone. Now, I know there's been about 4 or 5, 6 copies to hit bigger auction houses in the last year. If you were kind of talking, down the alleyways of collectibles the last year and a half, a lot of people talking about those. I actually know a handful of people that have 2 or 3 copies. So I don't know if maybe
same people, but
yeah, they're probably the same people. But the point is that there are more copies maybe than, and that's what we see with a lot of these auctions, right? You see a lot of people spending money that might not really follow the street level close enough to understand. Now, I'm not saying that that's not going to be the next big grail piece of that generation. However, there are more of those than say, what you would find in some of the other very rare collectible pieces, certainly in video games or VHS or whatever.
Well, and like you said, they'll come out of the woodwork now that there's like headlines of, almost 200 grand for one.
Yeah, I can't imagine that there's a ton of people that save those,
No, but there always are. It's a pattern. We see it all the time.
I know of, like you said, I know at least 2 people that have multiple copies. I might know a third that has multiple copies.
I remember you and I joking about it like 2 or 3 years ago.
2 or 3 years ago. And I'll be honest,
we were just brainstorming about what's coming down the pipe. And I think we even looked into it back then, but they were tough to find.
Well, when I got back into collectibles at the end of 2019, 2020, early time, of course, my brain, that's how you and I both kind of came up with the idea of VHS and sealed music and whatever else. Was like, oh, well, if this is a thing, let's just follow the breadcrumbs and figure out what the next thing's going to be. Mm-hmm. And, for me, I thought, well, iPhones, right? Like, if nothing else, at least as a grail piece, because there are some collectibles that it's like the one and only piece is the one, and then everything else is vastly secondary. And, how much are people going to collect the iPhone, the second generation, the third, the fourth? I mean, that to me doesn't have a lot of appeal. I mean, even in general, the iPhone, I think because it's so iconic, has a appeal to like maybe your super high-end collectors that want to have that one piece. But does it have the same nostalgia of like a box of video games, a comic book, something that you interacted with?
Nostalgia, no, but cultural significance, yes.
Cultural significance,
but
yes.
As we know, nostalgia is the hot button that makes people spend money for the most part.
Beyond that first big piece, right? That's why I think the first big piece can do it here, and that's what we're seeing. But I also had I looked into it that beginning of me getting back into this run of collectibles. Dude, even then, not only were they very difficult to find, but they were bringing $10,000.
Yep.
$10,000 to $20,000 at the time. You're talking 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. Okay. And I mean, you always say, it's certainly, I knew then it wasn't the peak, but it wasn't something that I was going to search for and say, I'm going to spend $10,000 or $20,000 on something. Then I think this is a for sure thing. I think it was something that we probably felt was more of a possible for sure thing, but honestly, it wasn't that appealing to me either. God bless whoever's buying them and spending the money on them, but there wasn't a lot of appeal to me in getting into sealed iPhones. And it's funny because I actually
don't have that nostalgia, that emotional hot button. If this is one of them bitchin' clear corded phones from the late 80s, 90s.
Oh, if I open briefcase phone from Pretty Woman, dude, I'm in. 200 grand, sign me up, dude.
Now eBay is going to be flooded with searches right now. From all 5
Richard Gere cell phone, Richard Gere hamster.
I do think if you had one of those Zach Moore's brick phones sealed, that breaks something.
I don't even remember what those came in. My uncle had one. My one uncle who did really well in the corporate world for about 4 years. Very small window he had there. But he was cruising around in the high end Volvo with the briefcase phone. I remember that in about 1980, 85, 6, 7, somewhere in there.
We had a lot of the same childhood, but a lot different. Like, I remember in 1998, my dad going to Russia for a business trip. And the phone rings and my mom's
what was he doing? Tetris?
No, nothing that cool. Welding.
Pez?
But just, welding's like Tetris. You're fitting everything together. Okay. It's more permanent.
Yeah.
The lines are, anyway, I hear like, Tom!
Yeah.
Guess where I'm calling you from? An airplane.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that amazing? He
probably spent like the $40 a minute. What a good dude, though, to do that.
Yeah.
So, we weren't rich enough to even have a cell phone, but God damn it, Dad made sure he called me on an airplane to Soviet Russia.
Well, a lot of people don't even have that recollection. People certainly younger than us. I mean, I remember when you had to pay X amount a minute, X amount of text message, and it was like, and then you could sign up for free nights and weekends and get all the calling you wanted after 7 o'clock or whatever, and it's so funny to think back on how all that unfolded.
Dude, I went over my minutes so many times.
Dude, there were some monster cell phone bills back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Certainly, like comparing it to the times, like I remember some cell phone bills that would hit like $300 or $400 in the 90s.
Oh, I did that. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Call me after 7 was the thing. Call me after 7. And it's funny because, I mean, you couldn't call if it was someone certainly not locally. It was the same thing. Your long distance phone calls were expensive.
Oh, do you remember that
on your home line?
Long distance.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that's some great memories right there. So yeah, the LCG auction, iPhone sold close to $200,000 last night. Most of the ones that had sold previously were in that $40,000 to $60,000 range. Like I said, when I looked them up 3 years ago, they were in the $10,000 to $20,000 range. So certainly this is a big jump. This is a significant jump, at the time for so quickly. And also the other one that was kind of a heartbreaker for me, and then this gives a little bit of, we all kind of started down whatever our main collectible path was, whether it was 5 years ago or 20 years ago, for whatever the reasons we chose. And certainly this big run the last couple of years has we start to dabble in something else because it's so nostalgic and blah, blah, blah. But eventually I got to the point over the last year, especially as your funds start to dry up for buying too many collectible types. It's like, dude, I can't go down all these rabbit holes, right? Wanted to do a lot of action figures, but I mean, those prices were already hitting astronomical levels some years ago. Okay. And so
it's a well-established market.
Established market going back 20 years. That was a different. So I got some obscure pieces, and one that's my all-time favorite piece is Megatron, Transformers Megatron. I remember getting that for my birthday in, I think, 1985 at Chuck E. Cheese. Or no, not at Chuck E. Cheese, at the other one. What was the one with this ugly, scary band? I always forget the name of it. The fake band playing. Yeah.
There was like a Dollar General Chuck E. Cheese, though. I remember that. What the hell was
I'm trying to remember the name. We talked about it earlier. Does anybody that's online here remember the other 80s pizza place that had the really scary band, man? The scary plane. It wasn't Chuck E. Cheese. It was something else. Well, that's where I got Megatron. Showbiz Pizza. Yes. Showbiz Pizza. Yeah. But I so vividly remember getting that for that birthday, playing with it, having it for a couple of years as one of my favorite toys. There was one on eBay for a year or two that sat for, I think it was an 85 graded one that sat for a while that I contemplated buying. Sealed, not qualified. for $10,000.
Tough grade
Yeah,
for that.
it was an 85 for $10,000 to $12,000. It was up for a while. Well, an 85 just sold last night for close to $60,000. And that was a really significant jump for, because I followed that piece for a year and a half and it didn't sell. And then it was on Instagram. I think the same seller had it circulating. So,
well, let me ask you, why do you think like it seems like Transformers toys in the last year have like they've always been a market, always been valuable, but it seems like they've gone up in the last year specifically, and I don't understand why.
Well, I thought last night's sale was a bit of an anomaly because I had seen a lot of toy stuff kind of flatten out or even go down with the rest of the general market. So I was surprised by that, but maybe the Transformers has kicked up. I think the really rare Transformers, I don't follow the market close enough to speak to it, poignantly to the point where I feel like, yeah, you trust me on what I'm saying here. But I haven't noticed that, but certainly last night was a big one that I noticed. But because that's a piece that I specifically watched and wanted. But I'll tell you what, speaking of nostalgia, there was a part of me, there's a couple of kind of off pieces, secondary pieces, strange pieces that I've kept, but I don't have a lot of memory of the boxes. Like I have memory of the boxes in the stores and, of video games, right? Video games. Like I have memories of video game boxes, right? There's a lot of nostalgia behind the box because a lot of us kept the boxes too. It's not like you just opened the game, took the cart. I mean, we have a lot of nostalgia with old NES carts and stuff, but most of us kept the boxes too. So we had the manual and everything else. And there's a lot of nostalgia just looking at the boxes themselves.
Optimus Overkill just joined. I don't know who that is, but we were just talking about Transformers.
The big thing that I kind of realized with toys was that I don't have anywhere near the connection to the boxes themselves. I have a lot of connection to the toys because I think being born in 1977, in the late 80s, early 90s, the run of Nintendo and Super Nintendo, you're a little older. I think you kind of take better care of your things and you kind of value opening them in the box and whatnot. So there's a lot of memories in there for me. Whereas you go back to G.I. Joe and Transformers and Masters of the Universe and whatever, like for me, the memory is in the toys themselves, right? So, touching the figures, feeling the figures. Right. That's a lot of the nostalgia.
Absolutely. I had this similar conversation earlier today, and toys are the one area where open box is doing just as well, if not outpacing as far as a market share as the sealed, right? Because the emotional hot button, the nostalgia, is like you just said, your memories are tied up on that brown thick carpet in your room or your living room, playing with them in your hands.
Yeah.
Video games not so much. Video games you're used to looking at the screen or maybe the box on the shelf, right?
Yeah.
That's visually what you're connected to. So it is an anomaly, but it's kind of a cool one, and it makes perfect sense that open toys are just the biggest market as the sealed, and plus they're way easier to display. The toys look way cooler opened in display. It's a 3D thing instead of like in their little cardboard jail.
And so many of them, so many of them yellow, right? And you get a lot of problems with the yellowing of the bubble and whatnot. So yeah, to me, I mean, if I'm going to collect toys, I mean, part of it is too, like if I wasn't collecting anything else, it's like, okay,
cheaper.
It's certainly a lot cheaper, but I think there's a lot of nostalgia draw to. I'm like, oh, I'd rather have it in a nice acrylic display case graded as the figure itself, which most of those look really cool if you've seen them in person.
Yeah, should I grab it?
Yeah, grab it. Or you have something like just honestly like open box where you're just playing with the toys yourself, open or feeling them. I have so much memory of the feel of the toy in my hand. And how they feel on so there's that one's obviously still sealed in the box, correct?
Oh
yeah,
unpunched too up here.
Yeah, great look to it.
Just look. I mean, with glare, it kind of looks like shit, but in person, you know how it is, man. It looks great. But I will say this with open toys too. When the company does it right, whether it's VG or what's VGA's open toy one,
AFA.
AFA, yeah. AFA, or there's some other companies that they make custom acrylic and the guy's standing there and then his two weapons.
Oh, yeah, they have it perfectly.
Dude, it looks awesome.
That's the one I'm referring to. Is I think that looks better than the box. And certainly some of the bigger vehicle things, like one of the toys that I have the strongest connection to is the G.I. Joe water moccasin. Okay, it's a boat. like a hydrofoil boat. And I realized like I had so much connection to the boat itself. The box didn't mean that much to me. Like it was cool to have it in the box, but certainly wasn't the same nostalgia. And there's a lot of things that go to, whether it's He-Man or G.I.
You
Joe.
didn't take the box in the bathtub with you, did you?
No, you did not take the box in the bathtub.
That boat you did.
That boat, man, I have so many memories of that boat. That was one of the few toys that I kept playing with till I was probably like 15. I just thought that was about the coolest toy.
Well, you're almost 50. Break that out again.
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
Just hop in the tub. I'll jump in. Oh, no, we'll get in the hot tub. That's what we'll do.
Hot tub with the G.I. Joe water.
Dude, and that's going to be a fun morning, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. Start the day with that. Woo!
So, my point is,
ladies, back off.
There's a lot of things for me that I think hit harder boxed and sealed rather than and toys for me is one that, you know what, I'm going to get some of the one. I have a few sealed ones that are kind of off that I'll display at some point and show off on the page. But
another nice kind of caveat about that is you can find like, you know, a MOC mint on card toy that you like figure. And I mean, the beauty of it is, and you know, me and you, like, we have a phobia of opening sealed things. It could be a fucking box of Raisinets, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. But like, if the box is chewed, the bubble is yellowed and crunched up, I would almost rather just send that into AFA or whoever you want to get your acrylic done. And then you have a mint figure, you have the mint weapons or whatever they come with.
Yep.
And just do it that way. And it wouldn't break my heart because it's already trashed. It already doesn't have value as a sealed item to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I almost did that a while back. There was like the wrestling superstars, Jake the Snake with Damien with the snake. Like, how cool would that be in acrylic? And I think it was like $40.
Well, I think, and it's interesting because last night they had a rerun on 60 Minutes about these like amputees from war or from accidents who've lost like a limb, especially an arm and a hand, and they're using these implants to like give them an arm that they can actually feel things with their hand. It was wild, bizarre, crazy Star Wars futuristic shit, and where they could still have feel and touch in their fingers. And I thought, to me, the toys memories are there. It's one of the few collectibles that it's really in the feel. Now, it is nice to open an NES box and get that feel of the kind of glazed over cardboard, you know, and have the feel of that, and certainly flipping through a comic book. But a lot of that is the same. There's no difference in each one of them. They're all the same. Whereas like a toy, like I could feel the contours of Megatron in my hand, or He-Man in my hand, or the G.I. Joe water moccasin with the little steps on the side with the buttons that the guy's in. Like I can still feel that memory in my hand. So for toys, to me, that's the way to collect. Now, I'm not trying to hate on guys who collect that stuff. Obviously, they're going to be like, you're an idiot. But to me, just speaking from the nostalgia standpoint, it's kind of like why people are very nostalgic about video game controllers in general, because you held them and they're all different over the generations, which I think is a really kind of cool piece of nostalgia that's also connected to that human touch.
Are you like that with your tennis rackets?
I mean, the handles are very similar. You know, I do have some memories of an early one that had an early Jennifer Capriati racket that I used, a Prince Synergy's CT26 or something.
God damn, that was stupid.
Had like a little.
We already went a half hour without bringing up 60 Minutes, and then that was over.
And that's out the window. You know, I'm bringing up tennis, 60 Minutes. Speaking of tennis, let's move on to last night's yesterday afternoon's Wimbledon final.
You need me for this, right?
Yeah, you can go have a beer.
All right.
So it's very interesting to see Joker choke that away. By the way, that was I haven't seen him choke like that or play that poorly in a big match in maybe forever. But it leaves the door open for something interesting that we're going to talk about later, which is talking about, you know, your GOAT. That's very popular these days. Who's the GOAT? Who's the greatest of all time? Who's your Mount Rushmore? Who's your your fantasy, your dream foursome on the golf course with you, and who are the other three guys? So in tennis, obviously it's Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, and he left the door open to kind of shuffle those around and see where guys would fall. And you know, that's an interesting thing that Nardini and I are going to explore going forward with the podcasting stuff that we've done, which is the aspect of the popularity, especially amongst men, of making a greatest of all time list, making a who's your Mount Rushmore list. And obviously, you know, tennis is one where you can nail the first three. And I found this, you'll probably think the same. I think it's interesting using the Mount Rushmore experiment or discussion because it seems so much easier to have like the top three. That fourth one is always the one that's difficult to figure out who's that fourth guy. Like a top five almost seems easier than a top three in some ways because you have that extra room. So there seems to be somebody that all like in tennis, you got Djokovic and Nadal, Federer, right? Sampras, okay, you can put him in as the fourth one. There's but usually the top three is difficult or is easy, and the adding that fourth person is difficult, which is always a fun discussion. And then of course, obviously creating an idea of who is the greatest of all time is something is always even more difficult to get it down to one person. Sometimes, depending on what it is that we're discussing. So. All right, we're done with tennis. You can come back now from eating your.
Hey, what's up? Just cut some fruit.
Speaking of which, I went to see. We both went to see since we talked last time. We were both had it on the list on the agenda to go see Indiana Jones. I saw it twice now. I loved it the first time. Absolutely loved it the first time. Maybe it was because I was just salivating for some Indiana Jones at this point. The second time I saw it, after you kind of poo-pooed it a little bit after we talked, I did see it in a little bit of a different light, but I still liked a lot of aspects of the movie. I know it wasn't your favorite, but I loved seeing, obviously, some of the older characters come back at different points in the movies, and I thought it seemed that Harrison Ford was much more engaged in this one than he was in the last one.
Oh, he wasn't?
I thought so.
No way.
Why do you say?
I don't even know if it was Harrison Ford. They just minimalized the Indy character whatsoever. He wasn't even a main character in his own fucking movie.
Well, they did use an obvious stunt double and a bunch of CGI stuff.
I'm talking about a stunt double. I'm talking about the story, the writing, character arc.
Yeah. I did understand your points, and certainly, like
There's
you
no
said...
character to root for in that whole movie. There's no antagonist that's worthwhile. The antagonist, the biggest problem with him is he's a Nazi, which, okay, I understand, but beyond that, what is there? There's nothing. Every single character is one-dimensional and flat. It's boring. It's too long. The story's uninteresting. You brought up the good point. Not that things need to be religious, but there's no... The first three, the great trio, there's a religious element to it, and it raises the stakes because whether you're religious or not, everyone by this time, or at this time in America, world culture knows there's good and evil, so to speak. Again, whether you believe it or not, but you still know that story archetype. So subconsciously, you're already paying attention. You know what the stakes are if things work out or don't work out. Number 4 was Shia didn't have that. It had aliens. Okay, whatever. It jumped a shark. Indy was always based in reality and realism to a point. Yes, it's an adventure movie. And now this one is, fucking time machine. Good God.
Well, I will say that was the point that I brought up in our conversation a week or so ago after we'd seen it. That was to be what was always the strength of the early movies, with that they were tied into religious idealism in some way, right? Two movies were Christian based. One was, Eastern religion, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, Sikhism, and that whatever. Like, there was a lot of aspect. I think the religious aspect getting taken out of Indiana Jones was the biggest failure of the franchise moving forward after Last Crusade. Out of everything else.
I just wanted you to disagree with me on any point, just so I could say Marcus would agree with me.
Dude, I just thought there was a lot of good stuff to like in this new one.
Man, the only funny line was, "You haven't drinking the blood of Kali."
Yeah. That was good.
Other than that, there's not one good line in the movie.
Well, a part about running away from the Nazis, but those are Nazis. I thought that was a good line at the beginning. I thought the characters were interesting more so than... I thought some of the characters... Now, I do understand your point of Kathleen Kennedy getting her hands through Disney on all these epic 80s franchises.
And keep in mind, that is not a biased opinion of mine, because I've watched no Star Wars, no fucking Willow, nothing. So it's not like I had a preconceived notion of that. This was firsthand.
But you've watched her. If you're out there and listening to me somehow, she took, like you said, all the strong masculine male characters of the legendary 80s movies and cut their balls off and replaced them with
a white brunette
a,
lady.
a woman of some sort that, God forbid, we are allowed to keep any strong male characters
Can't
into
have
any of
that.
these epic franchises. That I fully agree with you.
Then, spoiler alert, so it's already tanking, so you're not going to see it if you haven't seen it in the theater. And then they kill Shia off too, so there's no chance of a male character taking over whatsoever.
Right.
Now,
well,
Shia
they were
killed Shia off because he called Steven Spielberg.
He dug that himself, but certainly he would have been great
But they
in a lot of
didn't need
ways.
to kill the
I
character.
did like the way.
Choice.
Well, I like the way that they put that story together.
I actually do think I agree with that, and I like the end with him and Marion. But according to her, Karen Allen, the original script was much more Indy and Marion adventure and where they're at now and all this shit. And then what's her ass, Kathleen Ruiner, got her hands on it, and here we are.
Yeah.
Oh, that one line was so cringe. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, terrible writer, terrible actress. And I don't know if she came up with this line or not, but she's like, they're in the middle of this chase, right? Which is basically the whole movie. It's like 18 chase scenes and 5 minutes of story. And she's like, I'm a strong, independent woman and I'm perfect. Like,
yeah.
That doesn't fit any movie, let alone Indiana Jones. Like,
that's not exactly what you said, but yeah.
It's very, I'm paraphrasing.
I wasn't bothered by her character as much as you were. I didn't think it was that forced. There's a lot of characters that are forced, more forced than that recently. Whether it's diversity or feminism or whatever that are forced.
But what does that line add to her character or story?
Well, she's showing that anyway. You don't need to say it, but
that's what I'm saying. If you want a character that's like that, then show us. You shouldn't have to tell us.
Right, of course. And that's what I thought Top Gun did really well. They used diversified characters. They used strong women characters at certain points, and they didn't have to tell you or force any of it down your throat.
Bingo.
It was modernized. It was modernized in a natural, flowing way that felt right. I thought that was good. It will be interesting. The other thing that I think that both the last two movies did do well, which I thought was, like I'm watching with Maddie, and obviously women in general don't like to do a lot of studying of history. I was explaining a lot of the stuff about.
She just joined.
Woo, I missed that one. So there was just like I like how they captured in the last one the feeling of the United States in the mid 50s about communism and the Red Scare and all that stuff, right? They and Russians and whatever. And then I liked how in this one, even though they threw it back to some Nazism and stuff like that, there was still a lot of the feel of the late 60s and the moon landing and, the hippie movement starting and a lot of stuff like that. They really captured the time and feeling in the country through both of those two movies.
I disagree with this one. With the Shia one,
the last one,
the only
certainly.
feeling they captured was boredom. That's it.
Okay.
Well, how do they capture the 60s? There's one scene where at 8 a.m, the neighbors play some Beatles or Stones or whatever the fuck.
No, but I think just the way that the characters acted in a lot of ways kind of captured some of the feelings of the 60s. That's my opinion. But we can move on to another interesting topic, which is, so have you remember I called you and told you about this concert that's coming to
LA?
it's
LA.
It's in
Power,
Coachella. Yeah, it's Power
it's
Trip.
Not Coachella, but yeah.
Yeah, it's in that same vicinity where they have Coachella and they're going to use it now.
Yeah.
Dude, the lineup for that, if you guys haven't seen it or looked into it, the lineup is absolutely epic, okay? However, in the 2 weeks ago, they announced a major change, which I found to be a huge disappointment. So Friday was, I forget who the first, but Guns N' Roses is the headliner for Friday. Amazing. Okay, great. I mean, I've seen him multiple times now, but that's going to be an amazing Friday night. Saturday originally was AC/DC and Ozzy Osbourne, which is unbelievable Saturday. Okay. You're talking about Ozzy, who no longer is touring, who has said he's only going to do a few things here or there anymore and la-da-da-da-da. And honestly, I've seen Ozzy like 5 or 6 times. And one of the first concerts I ever saw was Ozzy. I love so much of his music. I was going through it the other day, and I was thinking, because between Black Sabbath and Ozzy and solo career, there's so much music so many albums, whereas like Guns N' Roses is my favorite band of all time, and there's so many great songs packed in essence, 3.5 albums. Okay.
And a hell of a run.
Unbelievable. I mean, there's 30 songs there that I follow and are all my favorites live.
Favorite Ozzy song? Go. Not Sabbath, Ozzy.
Ozzy solo?
Mm-hmm.
Probably Mama, I'm Coming Home or Mr. Crowley. Or
Crowley's good. I'm going Shot in the Dark.
Yeah, another great one. But Ozzy has 20, 30 songs between the two bands that I absolutely love on the same level in a lot of ways, spread out over many more albums. And then the Sunday lineup, Metallica. Like, dude, Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, Ozzy, and Metallica. What a freaking weekend.
You're forgetting two major bands. Iron Maiden, Tool. Are you fucking kidding me?
Okay, I understand.
Huge bands, huge following, and that don't tour super often.
Keep in mind that I think, from what I've heard, Ozzy's out. They announced Ozzy. He's been replaced, which is a total bummer considering I thought that was going to be one of his last shows that I was going to be able to try to see if I decided to go.
I mean, I hate to say it. He might be done.
Yeah, there's a good possibility, which would be very, very sad. But secondly, I think Iron Maiden's been replaced too.
No, Iron Maiden's not been replaced. Not as of this morning, anyway.
Okay.
What did you
Well, I heard...
I literally looked up the lineup this morning.
Well, because they changed... So Judas Priest is replacing Ozzy on Saturday, which, okay, dude, I've never seen them. I mean, they got some good stuff, but dude, it's here and here.
No way.
For Ozzy and Judas Priest, bro, it's not even on the same planet. Not even in the same universe. And then I know Tool plays on Sunday, which doesn't mean much of anything to me, but that's the only throwaway for me personally.
Throwaway Tool. Okay.
I think Iron Maiden is playing on Friday. Are they?
Saturday, I think. I thought Saturday was Maiden and Priest.
Right now, it's AC/DC and Judas Priest Saturday night is what it showed. So maybe that's Friday night. I mean, it's still going to be an absolutely epic, epic show. But my point in saying this is, I looked on their site and it says like, oh, we'll not be offering any refunds, la da 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 da. Dude, you can't pull a headliner as a promoter for a show and not at least offer the people a chance for a refund. In my opinion, I think that's a shitty move. You're pulling Ozzy. Imagine how many people probably bought a ticket just to hopefully see one of Ozzy's last shows. You know,
at least 7-10 people.
Get the fuck out of here.
I said at least.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, hey, anything else you want to talk about before we get into the?
I mean, this is our last Made in the 80s podcast, right?
It could potentially be. We haven't really, and I haven't talked about that.
Once in a while.
I think more than anything. So for those of you watching, we are transitioning here. That's a bad word to use. Yeah. Sorry about that. We're from the 80s. We're moving on potentially from.
We're moving on. It's happening.
We're moving on to a new podcast idea, which will hopefully encompass many different topics, many different passions of ours, many different things in a very strong, guy-oriented format. Not that doesn't mean anyone can't tune in because
we've been very feminine the last.
We've been very, very feminine.
Yeah, okay.
However, what guys love to talk about? What I talked about earlier, we love to make lists. We love to talk about who's the best or the greatest or the this or the that. So our idea moving forward, we're going to continue to do some Instagram lives with unboxing and talking about the 80s and things like that. But podcast-wise, we're putting together a new podcast based on the idea of who's the greatest of all time, or really more importantly, who are your Mount Rushmore, your 4 guys at the top of whatever list that we come up with for that week's episode. I think, who's your ultimate fantasy foursome on the golf course type of idea, picking those 4. And obviously in that you're included. So it's usually a 3-person there. So it's like the greatest of all time. You have your 3 guys for your golf foursome and then your Mount Rushmore. I think for us, the most interesting will be talking about it from that standpoint about what's your Mount Rushmore. And I think that's what we're going to be. What's your Rushmore?
What's your Rushmore podcast? There's already a YouTube page. And then on Instagram, it's just, you can search it Rushmore_podcast. Simple.
Rushmore podcast. And the idea is to give you an episode every week that's, fairly quick and easy and enjoyable and fun and quick. 20 to 40 minutes in that time frame. We're not going to get into these 2-3 hour podcasting. We're going to have, half-hour episodes once a week, coming up with a topic. I think it's going to be very interesting, a lot of fun, a lot of stuff to cover. Obviously, we'll have our things that everybody loves to talk about. Who's your 4 greatest NBA players of all time? Who's your Mount Rushmore of the NBA? And then some really strange stuff that I think will lead to some hilarious conversations throughout some examples. At least
some good arguments.
Some good arguments. And then we'll kind of make, okay, this is the Mount Rushmore of this at the end, and that will be the end of the show, something along those lines.
I think they got it.
They got it? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
So,
about 8 minutes ago.
Thank you for tuning in. We're going to sign off from the one of our
unboxing?
We are unboxing, but only on
Oh.
Instagram. So thank you for listening into these last 15 episodes. We may have one more in before we get moved on to the next thing that we're doing, our next great adventure. Well,
hopefully it's not as bad as Indy 5, but yeah.
So yes, we're signing off from our Made in the 80s podcast, which we will possibly do 1 or 2 more before we fully move into the Mount Rushmore of we will see. So stay tuned live, Instagram live. We got some cool unboxing stuff coming for you. If you want to jump on there, if you've been on YouTube or on the pod, you can find it on Graded 80s Kid or Sealed VHS. And yeah, thanks for having us, guys. Thanks for letting us in.
Thanks, guys.